There is a city buried beneath ash, a city that was once full of laughter, and bread ovens, and the soft echo of footsteps on stone. A city tucked between the blue water of the bay and the green slope of a mountain that everyone trusted. Its name is Pompeii. For most of its life, it was an unremarkable place, a working town, a town of merchants and bakers and fishermen, a town where children ran through narrow streets and old men argued politely about the price of wine. It was not the capital of anything. It was not the home of emperors. It was simply a small Roman city on the Bay of Naples, a place where the sea was warm and the soil was rich, and the days drifted gently from one into the next. And then, on a single afternoon in late summer, that city stopped. Not slowly, not over years, in a single afternoon. The mountain in the distance, the mountain everyone had grown up beside, the mountain whose vineyards produced the sweetest grapes in Italy, opened its mouth and breathed. And the city was gone, but not destroyed. Not really. Buried, held, kept. Tonight we are going to step quietly into that city, in the days and hours before it slept beneath the ash. We are going to walk its streets. We are going to listen to its bakers and look at the writing scratched on its walls. We are going to meet in passing a few of the people who lived there. And then we are going to watch gently as the day turns. So, find a comfortable position. Let the room around you grow soft. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let the day you have been carrying begin to set itself down. Let your breathing slow, and let the city of Pompeii come to you. We begin in the year 79 of the Common Era. It is, by the old reckoning, the reign of the Emperor Titus, who has been on the throne for only a few months. Far away in Rome, the great Colosseum is nearing completion. Workmen are still polishing its travertine. Far away on the northern frontier, in cold Britain, Roman legions are marching into the highlands of what will one day be Scotland. But none of that matters here. Here, in Pompeii, life has its own quieter rhythm. The city sits on a low plateau raised above the plain of the Sarno River, looking out at the bay. From the right vantage point, you can see all the way across the water to the headland of Misenum, where the Roman fleet is anchored. You can see the island of Capri, hazy in the south. You can see fishing boats, white-sailed, drifting in toward the harbour with the morning catch. Pompeii is not a large city. About 12,000 people live within its walls. Perhaps a few thousand more in the farms and villas that scatter the countryside outside. It is large enough to matter, and small enough to feel familiar. You could walk from one end of it to the other in less than half an hour. Its streets are paved in dark grey stone, blocks of basalt fitted together so tightly that the gaps are barely a finger wide. Down the centre of each street runs a shallow channel, where rainwater and waste flow toward the lower part of the city. Stepping stones are placed at the crossings, so that pedestrians can pass without wetting their sandals, and the wheels of carts, over time, have worn deep ruts into the stone on either side of those crossings. Ruts you can still see today. At every other corner there is a fountain, a low stone basin with a carved face above the spout, water running clear from the lips of a Silenus, or a Medusa. People pause here, slaves fill jars, a tired old man rinses his face, a boy splashes a friend and is shouted at. There is, always, the faint sound of running water somewhere in the city. You hear it without listening for it. It is part of what Pompeii sounds like. The sounds of the streets are layered, the clop of mules, the clatter of cartwheels, a hammer on bronze, the high voices of children. Somewhere, faint, the practice flute of a girl learning a tune. The whole city plays around you, ordinary and unhurried. The houses, from the street, look closed and modest. Plain walls, small doorways, but step inside, and a Pompeian house unfolds. There is a courtyard open to the sky, with a shallow pool in the centre catching rainwater. There are bedrooms tucked into the corners. There is a garden at the back, with a fountain and frescoes painted on the walls, gardens within gardens, deer drinking from imagined streams, songbirds caught mid-flight. Wealthy Pompeians live well. The poor live more simply, in apartments above the shops, or in rooms built into the walls of larger houses, where they work as servants and slaves. At the heart of the city is the Forum, a long open square flanked by columns, with the Temple of Jupiter at one end and the Great Basilica at the other. The Basilica is where business is done, contracts signed, lawsuits heard, gossip exchanged. Around the Forum stand the food markets and the wool market and the public toilets, with their long stone benches and running water. The walls of Pompeii are alive with writing, painted in red, scratched with a nail, daubed with charcoal. The people of Pompeii cannot stop writing on their own city. There are election notices. Vote for Trebius Valens, he makes good bread. There are advertisements for the games at the amphitheatre. There are love poems, some of them quite tender, and some of them not. There are simple, private little messages, the names of friends, the price of a jug of wine, a curse aimed at a noisy neighbour. There is graffiti, in the very Pompeian sense, that simply says, Cornelius was here, a man 2,000 years ago, wanting only to be remembered. He has been. Some of the writing is practical. Outside one wine shop, a list has been scratched into the plaster. We have everything from 1 as up to 4 asses, a menu in coins telling passers-by what they might drink for the price of a copper. Down the way, on the wall of a thermopolium, someone has chalked the name of a girl in 2-foot letters and surrounded it with a wreath. Beside it, in a different hand, someone else has written, simply, I'm tired. 2,000 years on, you read it and you understand. The election notices are everywhere. All the bakers are asking you to elect Trebius Adilol. The fruit sellers recommend Holconius Priscus. The muleteers ask you to elect Cuspius Pansa. A whole city, on its own walls, voting out loud. Down by the harbour, ships unload garum, the fermented fish sauce for which the region is famous, and load up amphorae of wine. The wine of Vesuvius is shipped all over the empire. Its vineyards cover the lower slopes of the mountain, the soil there dark and rich and forgiving. Inside the city there are dozens of bakeries. The bakery of Modestus is one of them, a small, busy shop where the millstones are turned by a blindfolded donkey, and the loaves are stamped with the baker's mark before they go into the oven. There are wine bars called thermopolia, where customers stand at a counter set with deep clay jars sunk into the marble and order a cup of warm spiced wine. Step into one of those wine shops on a hot afternoon, and the air is cool and a little sour. The dolia hold lentils, chickpeas, dried fruit, hot stews kept warm with charcoal beneath. A counterkeeper ladles a portion into a wooden bowl. The customer eats standing up, leaning on the marble. There are fullers who clean and dye the woolen togas. The Follonica of Stephanus, on the Via dell'Abbondanza, is one of the busiest in the city. Workers stand to their knees in shallow stone vats, treading on heavy cloth in a mixture of water and stale urine, collected, for a small fee, from public pots set out at the street corners. The smell, even from the doorway, is sharp, but the togas come out white. The cloth is pressed, brushed with thistles, and folded for the customer. Stephanus's name is painted on his own wall, beside a plea for a vote. There are jewellers and lamp makers and perfumers. There are temples to Apollo, to Venus, to Isis brought from Egypt. There are brothels plainly marked with painted signs above the doors, and there are public baths, 3 sets of them, with their hot rooms and warm rooms and cold rooms, their domed ceilings and dolphin mosaics, where in the afternoon half the city seems to gather. The Forum baths are perhaps the most fashionable. You come in through a small entrance, leave your sandals and your tunic in a niche, and pass first into the tepidarium, the warm room, where the air is heavy and pleasant, and the floor is gently warmed by hot air running through clay pipes beneath. From there, into the caldarium, the hot room, where the water in the great basin is almost too hot to bear, and the windows fog, and the voices echo softly off the vaulted ceiling. There is the smell of olive oil, and of the strigil scrapers the bathers use to draw the oil and the dirt from their skin. There is the smell of clean steam. People talk, gently, about nothing in particular. A boy walks past with towels. Then, at last, the frigidarium, the cold plunge, and a slow walk home. Names are everywhere in Pompeii. Pansa, Trabius Valens, Eucundus, the Vetii brothers, Julia Felix, who rents out her grand garden as a sort of public park, Eumachia, the priestess and patroness of the fullers, a whole population calling out across 2,000 years simply by having written down what they were called. This is Pompeii, a small, lively, ordinary town, and on this particular morning it has no idea that anything is wrong. It is the morning of the 24th of August. The sun comes up over the bay, washing the rooftops a soft pink. The light reaches the upper terraces of the great houses first, then drifts down the white walls into the streets, and at last into the lowest courtyards where the household slaves are already awake, drawing water from the wells. The bakers have been at work since well before dawn. Their ovens have been burning since the previous night, banked low, and now the fires are stoked again, and the dough is shaped, and the round flat loaves, scored across the top in 8 neat segments, are slid in on long wooden paddles. They are the same loaves you would still recognize, round, stamped, divided in 8, like a flower, so they can be torn into shares without a knife. The smell of warm bread begins to drift through the streets. In the houses of the wealthy, the doorkeepers unbar the front doors. Clients begin to arrive, men of lower station who have come to pay their respects to their patron, to ask a small favour, to simply be seen at his house. They are given a bit of food, perhaps a small coin, and they go on their way. At the house of the tragic poet, set into the floor at the threshold is a mosaic, a black dog straining on a chain, with the words Cave Canem beneath. Beware of the dog. The real dog, smaller than the one in the picture, lies just inside, his chain looped through an iron ring in the wall. In the forum, the merchants are setting up their stalls. The fishmongers lay out the morning catch on slabs of marble, sea bream, mullet, anchovies, octopus. Their hands are wet and silver bright with scales. The fruit sellers arrange figs and grapes and the last of the summer melons. The flower sellers carry baskets of late roses. Through the colonnade, a small group of schoolboys is being marched to the magister's bench. They sit in a row on a low stone step. The teacher, an older man in a worn tunic, holds a wax tablet on his knee. The boys, in unison, recite a line of Virgil, a half-remembered, half-mumbled hexameter about arms and the man, and the teacher corrects them, gently, by tapping the rhythm on his palm. A wedding is being prepared in one of the houses near the Stabian gate. The bride is young, perhaps 15, perhaps 16. Her hair is being braided into the traditional 6 locks, divided with the point of a bent iron spear, as Roman custom requires. She is nervous. Her mother fusses with the saffron veil. The household is full of the small, sweet chaos of a wedding morning. In the great house of Lucius Caecilius Eucundus, the banker, a man whose business records will one day be found, charred but legible, in his strong-box, the master of the house sits at a small table in his study. He is going through his ledgers, the wax tablets stacked neatly beside him. He records auctions and loans, the names of debtors and creditors, in his neat, slightly impatient hand. The morning sun falls across the page. In the outer office, a small auction is underway. 3 witnesses press their seal rings into the wax of the tablets. The transaction is recorded. The tablets are tied with cord, sealed, and stacked in the strongbox in the corner. They are still there. They will be found. Eucundus's tablets, when at last they are read, will tell us a great deal about the small business of the city. The auction of a mule, the lease of a farm, the sale of a load of timber, the collection of a bathhouse tax. He does not write of his own life. We only know that, on this morning, in his study, in the soft light of the bay, he was at work. Outside, in the garden, his children are playing. There is the laughter of small children. There is the sound of a fountain. Somewhere, in another room, a slave is singing very softly to herself as she works. In another house, the house of the Vettia, the brothers Aulus Vettius Restitutus and Aulus Vettius Conviva are receiving their morning visitors. They are freedmen, once slaves, now wealthy merchants, and their house is one of the most beautifully decorated in Pompeii. They are proud of it. They have every reason to be. This morning, garlands are being hung in their atrium. There is a wedding in the family. Long ropes of laurel and ivy are draped between the columns. The frescoes on the walls, the small cupids hammering at golden anvils, threshing wheat, weighing flowers, look down on the preparations with their painted, friendly faces. Down at the gladiator barracks, the fighters are at their morning training. They run and lift weights and practice strokes with wooden swords. There is the sound of wood striking wood. There is the smell of oil and sweat and dust. Forniendathere, no games are scheduled today. It is quiet. 20 years ago, in 59 AD, this amphitheatre was the site of a famous riot, when the Pompeians and the people of nearby Nuceria began to insult each other in the stands, and then to throw stones, and then to draw knives. The Emperor Nero himself banned games at Pompeii for 10 years afterward. Those years are long past now. The arena is calm. Up in the hills behind the town, a shepherd moves a small flock of goats along the lower edge of the vineyards. The grapes hang heavy on the vines. He cannot see the city from where he sits. He can see the bay. Down by the harbour, ships are loading amphorae. Wine of Vesuvius, wine of Sorrentum, garum from Spain. A crane, worked by men walking inside a great wooden wheel, lifts them onto a ship bound for Ostia. From there to Rome. In a courtyard near the wall, an old woman sits in the sun shelling beans. A cat, ginger and slow, sleeps on the warm flagstones beside her. The morning is, in that one small place, completely still. A small earth tremor passes beneath the city, very gently, like the shrug of a sleeping animal. A few clay cups rattle on a shelf. No one looks up. There have been little tremors all summer. There have been little tremors for years. 17 years ago, in 62 AD, there was a great earthquake here, a real one, that brought down columns and cracked walls and damaged the temple of Jupiter. The city is still rebuilding from it. You can see the scaffolding around the temple, the half-finished repairs in the forum, the new mosaics being laid in houses where the old ones were shaken loose. Earthquakes are simply part of life on the bay, so no one notices the small shrug this morning. The bakers go on shaping their loaves. Iucundus goes on writing in his ledger. Dandatimdes conpi face to enis pompi. The bride goes on having her hair braided, and in the distance the mountain stands quietly above the town, as it has stood for as long as anyone can remember. It is called Vesuvius. It is a single, gently sloped peak, perhaps 1,300 meters high, with a flattish summit and a dark, wooded crown. From the streets of Pompeii, you can see it any time you look north. It is part of the horizon. It is part of the air. Nobody in Pompeii thinks of it as a volcano. The word volcano, from Vulcan, the Roman god of fire, does not yet have its modern meaning. There has not been a recorded eruption of Vesuvius in living memory. There has not been one in the memory of anyone's grandparents, or of their grandparents either. The mountain has been silent for, perhaps, 1,000 years, perhaps longer. It is, to the people of Pompeii, simply a mountain, a backdrop, a familiar shape. Its lower slopes are entirely covered in vineyards. Generations of farmers have planted there, because the soil, though they do not know why, is exceptionally fertile. The vines grow heavy, the grapes are sweet, the wine of Vesuvius is shipped, in clay amphorae, to Rome and beyond. Higher up, the slopes are wooded. Wild boar live in those woods. Hunters go up there in the autumn. Goats are pastured along the meadows. There are, here and there, hot springs. There are places where the ground feels strangely warm to the touch. There are caves that smell faintly of sulphur. The country people know about these. They are simply to them the small oddities of the land. They are not warnings, they are features. Even Strabo, the Greek geographer, writing about 100 years before this morning, noticed the strange shape of Vesuvius's summit, the look of cinders, the rocks that seemed to have been burnt, and wondered whether the mountain might once have been on fire. But he wrote in the end that it had clearly long since been extinguished, for want of fuel. For want of fuel. The mountain stands above the bay. The vineyards on its slopes are heavy with the late summer grapes, which will be picked this year in another 3 or 4 weeks. The morning passes. The forum fills. In the distance, a thin column of white begins to rise above the summit of Vesuvius. At first it is barely visible, a wisp, the kind of cloud that any mountain might wear on a warm August day. People on the streets of Pompeii, if they look up at all, take it for steam, or for a far-off bonfire, perhaps a shepherd burning brush. But the column does not blow away. It rises higher and higher. It thickens and darkens and begins to twist on itself. By the early afternoon, it is no longer a wisp. Across the bay, at Misenum, the Roman naval base, an 18-year-old boy named Pliny is sitting in his uncle's villa, reading. His uncle is the admiral of the fleet, a man of immense curiosity, an author of an enormous encyclopedia of the natural world. The boy will grow up to be Pliny the Younger, the most famous letter writer of the Roman world. The uncle is Pliny the Elder. The boy's mother comes onto the terrace. She has noticed something odd. Far across the water, above the line of the mountains, there is a cloud, but not like any cloud she has seen before. It is rising in a long thin column, and then spreading out at its top in a wide flat canopy, with branches reaching out from its sides. The boy will later write, in a letter to the historian Tacitus, that the cloud looked, more than anything else, like an umbrella pine, that distinctive Italian tree, with its long bare trunk and its broad flattened crown. White at first, then in places dirty and stained, as though it carried earth and ash within itself. Pliny the Elder, fascinated, calls for a fast ship. He intends to sail closer to see this thing for himself. Then, as messengers arrive begging for help from the villas along the coast, his curiosity becomes a rescue mission. He orders the warships of the fleet to be launched. He goes himself. Across the bay, the umbrella pine cloud climbs higher. In Pompeii, people have begun to gather in the streets, looking up. The first ash begins to fall. It is light, at first. It drifts down from the sky like grey snow. Children in some of the streets hold out their hands and laugh, as children always do when something falls from the sky. Adults brush it off their tunics and squint up at the strange dark shape spreading above the mountain. Some of them go indoors. The first pieces of pumice begin to land on the roofs. Pumice is a curious thing, a rock that floats, full of tiny holes, light as a piece of bread. The pieces falling now are small, the size of a pea, then a grape, then a walnut. They tap on the tiles. They roll along the streets. People begin to bring carts out from their courtyards and pile them with what they can carry: a strongbox, a cushion, a small bronze statue, a child wrapped in a blanket. Some of them set off toward the harbour, hoping to find a boat. Some set off toward the gates, hoping to find a road south, away from the mountain. Some shut themselves into their houses, bar the doors, and wait, certain that this, like the earthquake of '62, like the small tremors of last week, will pass. It does not pass. The pumice falls heavier. By the late afternoon, the streets are pale. By the evening, ankle deep. By night, the lower windows of the houses are blocked by drifts of stone, and people are climbing up to higher floors to escape. The roofs, all over the city, begin to groan under the weight. Some of them begin to give way. A roof falling, in the dark, is a sudden and terrible sound. A crash of tiles, a sigh of dust. In some houses, those inside are caught. In others, the falling beams crush only furniture, and the family escapes into a different room. Outside, the air is full of pumice and ash, and the smell of sulphur. It is hard to breathe. Pieces of rock fall from the sky, hot from the upper atmosphere, hissing as they land. It is dark. It is the middle of the day, and it is dark. Pliny the Younger, across the bay, will write that it was not as in a moonless or cloudy night, but as if a lamp had been put out in a closed room, a blackness without bottom, the kind of darkness that is not the absence of light, but the presence of something else pressing in. In the houses of Pompeii, people sit close together. Mothers hold their children. Fathers count, again and again, the small things they have grabbed. Lamps flicker. The shrines to the household gods, in their little niches in the wall, are lit, and the small bronze figures glow softly in the dark. A few prayers are said. The household gods, the Lares, stand in their painted niches as they have stood all year, every year, since the house was built. Tonight, in the failing light of the lamps, they look almost as though they are listening. In the house of the Menander, a large and gracious house in the eastern quarter, 10 people have gathered in an inner room. A family, their slaves, perhaps a guest or two. They have brought in lamps. They have brought in a little food. They are waiting it out. The walls of the room are painted with calm scenes from the theatre. The door is closed. In the gladiator barracks, a watchman has not been freed from his chain. He sits at his post, the iron loop still around his ankle, the heavy ring still bolted to the wall. He may have been forgotten. He may have been ordered to stay. It is hard to know. Near the new Syrian gate, 2 women, one old, one young, perhaps a mother and daughter, perhaps mistress and slave, have stopped together in the rising pumice. They have brought a small purse of gold coins. They have brought 2 little bronze cups, the kind people carry to drink from at a fountain. They sit down. They lean against each other. They wait. In the temple of Isis, just off the great theatre, the priests have gathered around the small statue of the goddess. They have been preparing the morning's sacrifices. There are chickens in a basket, an egg, a small dish of figs and grain. The doors are barred, the lamps are lit. The priests in their white linen kneel together near the statue. At the Stabian baths, a man has tried to break out. The doors have jammed in the rising weight outside. He has found a chisel somewhere and a bronze hinge, and has been working at it. He is still working at it when the air becomes too hot to breathe. The chisel will be in his hand when he is found. Somewhere in the city, a dog has been left chained at the door of a house, and is now caught in the rising pumice, struggling. He cannot get free. His name, if he had one, has not come down to us. His shape will. In the gardens, the late roses are buried. In the bakery of Modestus, the bread that was being baked at the moment of crisis is left in the oven. 81 round loaves, scored across the top in 8 neat segments. The baker has run. The bread will still be there, in the morning, 2,000 years from now. The night passes, if it can be called a night, and toward dawn something changes. The mountain has been spending itself all afternoon and all evening in that single great column. The column has been climbing and climbing and climbing, perhaps 30 kilometers high, into the upper sky. It has been held up by the sheer force of the eruption beneath it. Now that force begins to falter, and the column begins to fall. Down the northern slopes of Vesuvius, then down the western slopes, then south, sweeping toward the bay, the collapsing cloud comes down in waves. It is not lava, there is no slow glowing river. It is something faster and quieter and far more final. A blast of superheated gas, full of fine ash and rock, racing along the ground at hundreds of kilometers an hour. Hotter than boiling water, hotter than an oven, a wave, you might say, but a wave of air. The Romans had no word for it. We call it a pyroclastic surge. The first waves reach Herculaneum, the smaller town to the north of Pompeii, in the small hours of the morning. The town vanishes beneath them. Then, after dawn, the surges come for Pompeii. They sweep through the city like a held breath being let out. They pass over the rooftops. They pour into the streets, and the courtyards, and the open doors. The air itself becomes too hot to breathe. It is, for those who are still alive in their houses, very fast, faster than a thought. The narrator, in tellings like this, sometimes lingers here. We will not. The kindness of 2,000 years is that we can speak softly of what happened, and not crowd the moment with detail. The people of Pompeii, the bride with her saffron veil, the banker at his ledgers, the children in the courtyard, the dog at the door, were ordinary and loved and unprepared. Their last moments were brief. The mountain, having spoken, fell silent. The ash kept falling for another day. When it was over, Pompeii was no longer visible. The plateau where it had stood was now a flat grey field, 6 meters deep in pumice and ash. The streets were gone, the forum was gone, the temple of Jupiter was gone, the basilica was gone. The bakeries, the brothels, the wine shops, the houses with their gardens within gardens, gone. Across the bay, Pliny the Younger had survived. His uncle had not. The admiral, having sailed toward the eruption to help the people on the coast, had been overcome by the fumes on the beach at Stabiae, and had died there, an old man with a curious mind, undone by his own kindness. The boy Pliny would later write the only first-hand account we have of the eruption, 2 letters sent in middle age to the historian Tacitus, in which he tries calmly and precisely to describe what he saw as a frightened young man. It is from those letters that we know. In Rome, the Emperor Titus declared an emergency. Funds were sent. Senators were appointed to organize relief for the whole region. The towns of Herculaneum and Pompeii were initially spoken of as places that might be excavated, that might be restored. They were not. Within a generation, the precise location of the buried cities was no longer certain. Within 2 generations, it was forgotten. The land grew green. Slowly the ash settled and crusted. Grass came in. Trees followed. Farmers, finding the soil unusually rich, for the same reason their grandfathers had found it rich, the volcanic soil that had once made the wine of Vesuvius so famous, planted vines. They did not know what they were planting on top of. The towns disappeared from maps. The local people, when they spoke at all of the place beneath their fields, called it simply La Civita, the city. But no one was sure which city, or what had happened to it, or whether it had ever really been there at all. Centuries passed. The Roman Empire ended in the west. The Bay of Naples passed from emperors to barbarian kings, to Byzantines, to Normans, to Spanish viceroys. Vesuvius itself erupted again, in 472, in 1631, in smaller bursts between, and each time the local people fled, and each time they returned. But the buried city slept on, undisturbed, for nearly 1700 years. And then in the year 1748, a workman digging a well struck something hard. It was a wall, a painted wall. The men who came after him, slowly, carefully, began to clear away the earth, and discovered, behind it, a fresco, a Roman fresco, bright as the day it was painted, the colours preserved by the very ash that had hidden it. They had found Pompeii. They did not know it yet. At first they thought they had found Stabiae, but they had found it. Charles III of Bourbon, the King of Naples, ordered the work to continue. He sent a Swiss engineer named Carl Weber, who drew proper plans and insisted on recording each find. Weber was, in his small steady way, the first archaeologist of Pompeii. From that moment on, year by year, decade by decade, century by century, the city has been coming back. It came back slowly. Frescoes, statues, courtyards, columns, mosaics, bakeries with grain still in the millstones, wine bars with the dregs still in their jars, the little altars of the household gods, the small bronze figures still in their niches. The strong box of Lucius Caecilius Jucundus was found, charred but intact, with his wax tablets stacked inside it, his loans, his auctions, the names of his clients, in his neat, impatient hand. The bakery of Modestus was found, with its 81 round loaves still in the oven, scored across the top in 8 neat segments. The dog was found, still in his collar, near the door of his house. In 1909, on the edge of the city, the Villa of the Mysteries was uncovered, a great country house with a long room of frescoes that the ash had kept almost untouched. The reds were still red, the figures, life-sized, performing some quiet ceremony nobody now fully understands, looked out from the wall as though the painter had only just put down his brush. The Vettier brothers' house, after long years of restoration, was reopened to visitors not very long ago, and the painted cupids on its walls, threshing wheat, weighing flowers, hammering at golden anvils, can be seen again now, in soft museum light, by anyone who walks through. Other discoveries came in their own time. The thermopolium of Vetusius Placidus, with its dahlia still bearing the residue of beans and chestnuts. The garden of the House of the Golden Bracelet, painted as though the room were a living orchard, mosaic floors, bronze candelabra, a whole library of small ordinary things. In 2018, archaeologists found a charcoal inscription on a wall, dated to the 17th of October. The eruption was probably not in August at all, but in the autumn. We are still learning, even now, the small details of what happened. Up the coast, in Herculaneum, a villa was found with a small library of papyrus scrolls, carbonized into black sticks of charcoal. They were too fragile to unroll. Modern eyes, working slowly, are still reading the words those scrolls held, line by line, letter by letter, with patience and with care. There is something else. In the 1860s, an archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli noticed that the bodies of the people of Pompeii had decayed inside the hardened ash, leaving hollow shapes, perfect, person-shaped voids. The bones were still there, lying at the bottom of the void. Around them, the ash had set hard, as though someone had pressed the body into clay, and then very gently removed it. Fiorelli began to pour liquid plaster into those voids. When the plaster set, and the ash was cleared away, what emerged was a cast, a quiet grey figure, in the exact position of their last moment, lying down, curled up, a hand raised to a face, a mother holding a child, 2 maidens side by side, embracing, a man, in the corner of a stable, with the iron shackle still around his ankle. The dog, twisted at the end of his chain, his head turned back toward a door that did not open. What the casts give us is not skeletons, it is gesture. It is the moment itself, a hand at a mouth, a head bowed against a wall, an arm laid across a smaller shoulder. It is the body, not as it lived, but as it was last held by the world. The narrator, here, will say a quiet thing. These were people who suffered. The casts do not hide that, but they also do not magnify it. The plaster is plain and grey, and the figures rest, mostly, as though sleeping. Curators leave them alone. Visitors lower their voices. In the garden of the fugitives, 13 of the casts lie together as they were found. A family, perhaps, who had run toward the gate. They did not reach it. They lie now in a row, in the soft light. People walk past without speaking. We do not know all their names, but we know how they died. These plaster casts are still in Pompeii today. They are not frightening. They look, mostly, as though they are sleeping. Pompeii has now been excavated, in fits and starts, for almost 300 years. About 2/3 of the city has been uncovered. The rest is still under the fields. There are houses still buried that have never been seen. There are frescoes in the dark that no one has yet looked at. In the parts that have been uncovered, you can walk. You can walk along the basalt stones of the Via dell'Abbondanza, the great east-west street of the city, with its bakeries and its election notices, its wine bars and its fullers. You can step on the stepping stones at the crossings. You can see in the stone of the road the deep ruts cut by the wheels of carts that came and went 2,000 years ago between the harbour and the Forum. You can stand in the Forum itself, with its long avenue of columns, and look north. There, at the end of the Forum, framed exactly between the columns, is the mountain. Vesuvius. It is a little lower than it was in 79. The eruption took the top off it, but it is still there, still gentle-looking, still wearing, on most days, a small white cloud at its summit. You can stand in the courtyard of the house of the Vetii, with its painted gardens and its statues and its small fountain, and imagine the brothers receiving their guests. You can stand in the kitchen of Euacundus's house, where the family slaves prepared his breakfast. You can stand in the bakery of Modestus, in front of the oven where the loaves were left. And on the walls of the city, still scratched into the plaster, you can read what the people of Pompeii wanted to leave behind: election notices, love poems, insults, prices, names. Cornelius was here. He has been remembered, this Cornelius. 2,000 years on a quiet morning, before a mountain that he could not have feared spoke for the only time in his life. He wrote his name on a wall. The wall was buried, the wall was kept, and now his name is read again by visitors who walk slowly past it, in the soft afternoon light of a Pompeian street. The city is quiet now. The bakers are gone, the bride, the banker, the brothers, the chained dog, all gone. But their kitchens are here, their gardens are here, their bread is here, their handwriting is here. It is, in its strange way, a tender place, not a city of horror, a city of small, ordinary, preserved lives, a city where you remember that the people of 2,000 years ago were not myths or paintings, but men and women like you, who got up in the morning and ate bread and worried about money and loved their children and watched the sun come up over the bay. The mountain still stands above them. The bay is still blue. The vines planted again on the slopes of Vesuvius are heavy with grapes. It is late summer once more, in the Bay of Naples, and somewhere, on a wall of the Via dell'Abbondanza, in lettering that the rain has not yet touched, a name waits patiently to be read. Sleep well.